Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for episode 8 of our podcast. We are going to be talking about what happens when you trust a pseudo-expert developer and other types of professionals as well.
Yeah, welcome to the episode 8 of the groundbreaking podcast. Thank you. This is Rogelio.
This is Jacob,
and we're Primera Land developers. Jacob's mentioning about the pseudo-experts in land development. Pseudo-experts could be an engineer, they could be contractors, they could be
surveyors,
they could be
draftsmen,
particularly draftsmen. And there's also some people that they call themselves like land developers, and what they go out and try to do is get people to sign in their properties into becoming land developers that try to go and get property owners to sign off their property so they can develop their land for them. And this could be very risky if you're dealing with a pseudo-expert, somebody that doesn't know what they're doing.
Also known as a quack for those of you who are familiar with the term. So I guess, we're going to get started. We're going to, really set the tone here. But, one of the worst things that can happen to an owner or a property owner or someone who wants to aspire to become a developer is to sign a contract with the wrong type of person. And we'll go over some of, the issues that can lead to a little bit further down the episode. But, those can be some of the worst financial mistakes you can make in this business, is partnering up with people who are either frauds or are trying to take advantage of you in a way that you may not realize by different methods, just because you're not familiar with developing.
Right. That's what these people do best. They prey on that the owners, they don't know what they're doing, and they're easy prey for them, and they make them send documents that put them in a very rough position, and where they give in basically all the power to this developer and they lose power to do anything. So we'll discuss it further, and hopefully you guys can learn how to protect your assets from these types of situations.
So I guess what we need to start with is that someone who's never developed may not be familiar with the regulatory processes that are required. And maybe even the person that you're working with may not be completely familiar with it. Even as professional engineers, a lot of times in cities that we haven't worked, we have to spend a lot of time and effort to review their ordinances and review, their manuals in order to understand what are some of the rules that they are requesting to follow in their cities, because not every city has the same rules. And oftentimes people think, oh, I did it in this city, so it's just as easy for me to come over here. And that's not the case. Even if they're not trying to, I guess, take advantage of you, they may not be prepared for the regulation and the rules that city has, and that ends up costing you big time as the landowner.
Yeah. Another way I could say is this that happens to people that are usually trying to find the best deal, and then somebody comes in and offers something that is much better than the competition, and it's typically because there's some missing details there. Somebody's scope. Yes, somebody's scope, or somebody's taking more risk than they really need to. In this case, it tends to be the owner takes all the risk while the developer takes little to no risk, and that's how they take advantage of owners.
Yeah. I guess, or, the people that tend to be victims of this is first-time landowners, families, first-time land developers, landowners that have never developed before and are a big target. Families that just inherited a property from a family member, your aunts, your uncle, your parents pass away, they give you land, and now, it's kind of like it's almost like fell out of the sky. So you don't feel that you are heavily invested in that land so much, but someone comes and offers you a way to make a whole bunch of money from the land that just fell into your lap, and you may be less inclined to protect yourself. People who are barely starting out in investments, and another big target is people who are experienced investors but are not in the area. They're out of town. They may not realize some of the regulations and things that are required in one state versus in another.
I would add that people that don't want to be involved in the day-to-day operation of the land development business, especially those, because if you're not looking into the work that is being done or performed, they could be doing, bad things with your money.
I have a quick story. When I was working for a firm previously, there was a developer or a huge development company out of California, and they were building a like $400 million development in Austin, and they had a representative, a guy that came in from Austin, and that guy was like taking everybody out to bars and partying and like, expensing everything, like business expense on the company expenses as part of the development expenses. That he was supposedly taking out city officials and doing things in order to grease the wheels for the development to move forward, to get favorable treatment in the development process, when in reality nothing was being applied, nothing was being moved forward. And he spent millions by the time that company from California figured out that this guy was just
spending money,
hustling them, and
millions.
Yeah, probably like $2-3 million by the time they caught it. So, I mean, on a project that's $300 million, it's not, or $300 million investment project, it's not the end of the world, but it's still, for day to day, $3 million is a lot of money. And yeah, he went through that like in 4 or 5 months or something like that.
The reality is that you can be sponsoring, I don't know, things, events, sponsorship,
Those will happen.
profits. It's that does happen. But wow, to run $2 to $3 million.
Well, not actually doing anything. They weren't actually doing any of the work. They were just doing the partying portion of it. And so that was a very interesting situation that happened with that company. Needless to say, they caught on. They were not a first time developer, that company, but still, it was surprising that a company that is experienced, that could happen to them, much less to someone that's not aware or as tied in or as experienced as they are.
If things sounds like they're going too good, maybe take a look into it, because it may not be the case. Another story, maybe I shouldn't talk about this one. Somebody trusted a person too much, and that person started,
mishandling,
actually stealing.
Okay.
He was stealing checks, putting them into his personal accounts, and everything sounded like everything was going great, but he was stealing the money, and then he left, and I'm sure this person was persecuted by the authorities.
I mean, this happens to a lot of people, even companies. I've heard of like McDonald's or something like that, like a big company name, that I don't think it was specifically them, but a chain like them, where, they had an accountant, I think, who had like 3 people on the books, and for like years, like 2-3 years, and then finally realized that those 3 people didn't exist. The accountant was just cashing in 3 extra checks every month. And why? Because corporate, maybe they came by to visit once every 6 months or something, and they came back, another 6 months, or a different person came by 6 months. Oh yeah, we have everybody here. We have 12 out of 15, but the other 3 are sick today or something like that. They trusted the accountant. I guess their accountant was the point of contact for the chain. And I think they had multiple restaurants for businesses, and they had maybe 1 employee at each location of the 3 that they had in their region. They had 1 employee that was supposedly working, but didn't exist. So it happens. If you're not involved, that can happen. Those are things that
it happens from small businesses, and it happens in big ones.
Yeah.
So the risk of hiring these persons, right, I would say, is mainly that you're taking all of the risk. If you're trying to make a deal with somebody and this person tells you that he's going to do everything, really read into the contracts that he brings you. Usually, if somebody is doing everything for you, it should be the opposite. The person that is doing everything for you should be the one taking the risk rather than the opposite. And it's actually the opposite that tends to be the case, that they tend to put all of the risk on the owner of the properties, and at the end, they're the ones getting screwed. Right?
It reminds me of the Wall Street, where you're the one who puts in all the money, and if it goes bad for you, it goes bad for you, and if it goes good for you, they take a cut.
Yeah.
So you take all that risk, and we'll take a cut if it goes well.
Yeah. Well, that's typically not how you want to do business. I mean, in Wall Street, it's different.
That's the way. Yeah, that's the way that is. But over here, you have options, and you should exercise them so that you limit your risk.
Yeah. There's several types of people that could be doing this. I've heard of third parties, a business type person that wants to go in and contract an engineer, wants to go out in and contract a surveyor, a contractor, and makes everything happen, right? In the best case scenario, what tends to happen is sometimes these third persons are maybe a draftsman that wants to do business to himself, start doing the design, and find somebody to sign and seal the projects. Hopefully, even review it and then process the project, right? But someone with just a director experience may not know that there's some fees that happen at the city, may have forgotten that they need to call the power company in advance so that the subdivision, once it's complete, has power. I've seen this happen. They record the subdivision and there's not the subdivision because nobody contact AP.
Yeah. And then
We just learn of a particular project
we learned about one recently.
recently.
And it happens not just to, I mean, it can happen to professionals, but it's less likely to happen to a professional where, you know, they have to do this regularly versus someone who's never done that part of the work. They think the full design is just getting the drawings and putting a stamp on them. And that's part of it. It's not all of it. And you know, they may even try their hand at doing light construction, you know, doing some construction themselves and, you know, getting bids and then figure out how much their costs are. And then say, yeah, I'll do it for the same amount. And they've never done that type of work. And then they're there trying to do it for you. And are they trying to find people from Home Depot to, you know, come and
finish
finish the work or do the work for you at $20 a day?
Or worse, they charge you immobilization, they charge you initial work.
And then they never show up.
And then they go in, figure out that they're not going to be able to do it. And then they leave and you don't hear from them again. Yeah, that's happened many times.
Another big risk that we're discussing earlier is, you know, what happens when, let's say you start your subdivision, you hire your contractor, you're doing all these things, and then you realize 3/4 of the way through that there's some fees that you needed to pay or some things that you haven't paid yet, and they weren't aware. It might not even been that they were trying to hustle you, but they weren't even aware those fees existed. And now you can't get that money to pay those fees. And now your project's frozen. You have all this money that you owe. You're paying interest, you know, on this money. If you borrow money, maybe, you know, you gathered every cent you had. And, you know, I'll give you an example of one of our clients. We were getting ready to start construction and we let her know, hey, you have to pay this bill. It's like almost $100,000 on a, you know, $1 million project. So it's like 10% of her project. And she's like, I can't, you know, I don't know that I can pay that. Like, is this like additional? And I was like, no, it's already included in the amount that we originally gave you and that you sent to the bank. So she was covered. Yeah, she was covered. Why? Because yeah, it was at the end, it was last minute, this thing, but we knew that those fees existed and we had accounted for them in her process. And so when we gave her the estimate to take to the bank, we included that in there. So when she first heard that we were asking for, you know, $100,000 or whatever for fees and this and that, she was about to have a heart attack because she thought we were like coming in last minute with this, and her bank approval was like about, you know, already included it. Yeah, it didn't include it. And where was she going to come up with an additional $100K? And so, you know,
but it was accounted.
Yeah, it was accounted. It wasn't like she just wasn't aware that we did include it already in her bill. But
it happens a lot, Jacob, that a developer, I'm gonna build a subdivision. Here's my price from the engineer and the surveyor. Here's the contractor price. So 800,000 from the contractor, 100,000 from the engineer, 100,000 from the surveyor, $1 million. And then they forget about the fees from the city. They forget about the fees from the water supplier, and that could be another $100,000 to $200,000, $300,000.
Yeah,
the inspection fees from cities
are like 2% or more.
I've seen the 5 up to 7%.
Yeah, and then park fees come out of nowhere.
5%.
You're pretty aware that, yeah, like I don't have a park on my property. Yeah, but you still have to pay the fee because you didn't put a park on your property.
The power.
Yeah, power comes in and they're like, hey, well, actually, in order for us to put in the poles, we're going to charge you $60,000. And you didn't even make an application yet. And you didn't realize that those $60,000 were needed. And
then mailboxes. I need to put mailboxes to record the subdivision.
Yep. And what much are mailboxes? You know, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, maybe more, depending on how many lots you're developing. But there's a lot of things that are not really part of the design that sometimes if someone isn't aware or hasn't done the development process, they don't realize that those things exist. It comes in last minute and then you can't record and then you're stuck and you can't get the money because maybe some people watching this may have, you know, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 under their blanket, but under their mattress. But I don't, yeah, I don't keep that kind of money under my mattress. So,
or even if some people have that kind of money, maybe they plan to use it somewhere else. Or
those are things that can happen with someone who thinks that they are aware or they believe that they know enough and maybe had the right intention, maybe did everything else right and were doing good by you, and they were not aware. And you know, it's unfortunate, that now you're on the hook for that money. And
and whenever this problem comes up, maybe the power or the fees for the city, that person would say, no, it wasn't in my scope of work. It was that was your responsibility. Again, putting the risk on the owner, which is what most of these people tend to do.
So I guess one of the biggest things is, don't fully trust in someone to handle 100% of your project, unless it may be that someone recommended it to you. A friend of yours that's investing. Hey, I'm using this guy, and so far so good. He's done 4 or 5 subdivisions for me. He's done a great job. I would still not put all my
Eggs in
one basket. I would still trust to verify. Definitely don't say yes to the first person that comes in.
And then questions.
Yeah. Or show me the subdivisions you recorded, and then you can call the owners of those subdivisions and be like, hey, this person worked with you. How did that go? I mean, would you recommend them? If you were to do it again, would you work with them again? Those are all valid questions that if they're a legitimate person, they would be more than happy to share that with you and say, hey, look, this is the person. You can go to the county, you can find the subdivision, you see it's the same name on the subdivision and the owner, and you can call and talk to that owner, or you can go to the county and see if they've had any issues with that person. There's a lot of things you can do to try to mitigate these issues.
And you have an engineer.
Yeah.
In the case of land development, ask where all these costs coming from.
Yeah.
The engineer will tell you.
Yeah. They shouldn't have to hide anything. It should all be, up front and easy to explain.
Moving on, some of these associated costs, we kind of mentioned them.
The penalties, interest rates. Really, those are some of the biggest ones. But you can also get screwed in other ways. Someone offers to make a subdivision for you, but you're going to leave them the front so they can do commercial. And then when it comes time to plat, they let themselves, 2 acres, 3 acres, and you thought they were only going to get like half an acre. And really, in that location where your property is, the value might be in commercial. And so, yeah, he got you the residential, but maybe the residential, even all put together, isn't worth what your property was worth raw. So it's not just penalties, but it can also be being cheated of really the value of your property if you weren't aware of what that value is. They promised you to give you the commercial, and they were just going to take the back and then leave you just a small little piece on the front to put nothing. And now, they left you. They fulfilled their contract.
And you gave him authorized representative.
And you give them that authorization to do that.
Right now we have many focus on money, of things that hold the project because they forgot about money. But sometimes they forget to call in to put the supervision on the list for review, or there may be a flood zone that they're not addressing. AP could take like 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year. Flood zones typically take a year at least.
I'm not going to call out names here, but we recently, we had a client where they came to us and they're like, hey, I have this lot that I'm looking to purchase, and I already have this design that I got my, architect to put together based on the dimensions of the lot, and the price is right. Charge me to do this project. And so we're like, yeah, sure, that I'll put together a sticker. Well, at first I wasn't even thinking of doing a feasibility because he already had drawings and everything. So at first I thought we were just going to jump straight into an engineering cost because he already had the building layouts. He already had where everything was going to go. So I thought this property's already been checked. But before I started it, we said, let's just give it a quick once over before we start. And before we spend time putting together a contract and a scope of work and timelines and all these things, let me just spend a few minutes to look at it. One of the very first things we checked is floodplain, and it's right smack in the middle of a flood, basically a floodway. Yeah, I had to call that client and tell him, hey, we love the project. It looks great, but were you aware of this? To do this, it's going to probably cost hundreds of thousands, and you're likely not going to be able to get it out of the floodplain. You're going to have to mitigate at the very least, like acres of your land has to be converted into residential just to mitigate where you're going to be adding infill. Basically, the property was
Not feasible.
not feasible. Not. I hate saying that. Yeah, it's just
Money feasible.
yeah. It was not worth the value of that land, and that project is not worth the investment that was going to need to be put in to try to save it. If it was in the middle of downtown Austin or Houston, we might find a way.
Downtown McAllen,
Maybe
Edinburgh.
but downtown Austin, downtown Houston, downtown New York, I'm sure we can figure out a way to get it to work. Even if we had to put the building on stilts so that it's above the floodplain, we would have built a building like that. But
And here's the main problem is sometimes engineers don't tell you that until you're deep into the engineering process.
Yeah.
You already sign a contract, you already spend money on survey, you already spend money
on all the engineering
ads and submitting plat.
and it's in the fine print that, hey, we haven't, this is not included. So if it comes up, you're going to pay me separate. So then you may have spent $100,000 on engineering and surveying, and I'm like, hey, by the way, it's going to be another 100 to do the study that's required of this property. And so now you've just doubled your engineering, and then on top of that, it's going to take a year or 2 years to get this through FEMA. And so
We don't do it that way.
yeah, so the first thing we do is we try to check properties, even if it seemed like that property was ready to go with this client, because again, they brought us a whole layout design that was ready to go with. It even had the, what was going to be put inside the apartment units that were going to be put in. They already had the layouts for the actual units themselves. And, at first glance, we thought it was ready to go, but unfortunately it wasn't. And the good thing is he didn't purchase that property, and he may have spent a little bit of money on architectural plans. But the good thing is that that's minimal compared to
He only lost a few $3,000 and he moved on into a new project rather than be stuck and spend more than a few $10,000s being designed and then to find out that it doesn't work.
I mean, you can make any property work with enough money, but that property is not worth that.
Ouch. This could happen. If you sign away in a document and you give authorization to a third party, they may have the authority to sell your property without your consent. Well,
With your consent,
we give consent because you already gave them authorization.
you give them the power of attorney to do that. Depending on how the contract was written, if you give them the power to do that, they can legally sell your property.
Yes.
This happened to me. I went on vacation in the middle of purchasing a property. And so I gave power of attorney to my sister to sign the contract for me if the paperwork was ready during the time that I was on vacation. And so there were some things that happened, and I ended up coming back and signing it myself at some point, or I came back from my vacation, I was able to sign it after. But I gave her the power to do that. And if she did it, then she would have done it. Right. And that was my family member that I trust. I trust my sister to handle that. But, I wouldn't have given that power to a random stranger to sell property or purchase property for me.
Especially somebody trying to sell you something. Right? That's how it typically goes. Somebody tries to sell you that they can do the development on your property, and then you sign away power of attorney and authorize whatever.
Good.
So they can do whatever they want on your property.
Yeah. So we asked for a lot of
We ask for authorization.
authorizations, but if you read our text, it says
It's limited.
limited authorization, specifically dealing with engineering processes, not anything to do with the actual legal status of your property or being able to transfer it, sell it, do anything other than perform engineering processes. So, but read the fine print.
Read it. It could be devastating whenever somebody's trying to develop, whether you have save your life earnings, maybe your properties, your life earnings, and then somebody else comes in and does a deal of the project or pushes to do a project and then misses a lot of the real cost, and you have to come up with the money out of your own pocket. It could be devastating. You could even lose your project, lose your property.
And aside from financial, I mean, it's a lot of times it can be your life savings. We had a client, actually, we weren't able to retain this client, but that client is working with their parents' money. And they're working on the project. They reached out to us, and they had already gotten a quote from a different engineer. We told them that we weren't able to match that price. I gave her some advice and told her, hey, just make sure that this price is correct. Ask for a full scope. Make sure that they're providing all the things that you do need. If they are, then I'm happy for you, because you're able to invest your family's money in a better way. This project was a little bit far for us. We had to travel to go do like recording or anything. We were going to have to travel like an hour and a half, by car for all these things, all the meetings.
It's in the PFACE project, so multiple years.
Yeah, multiple years. And basically we would have to go back every time we needed to do something. So we were like, hey, for us, it's not feasible to do this because just going and coming back is 3 hours. And we have to do this like 10 times or 15 times throughout the life of the project. I'm happy they found someone in locally that can help them better than we can and for a better price. And I hope their project goes well. I'm always cautious, because the price did seem too good to be true, in my opinion. So I did make sure to tell her to ask some questions and just make sure to get things in writing. And she did. She let me know she did ask some questions, and there were some things that were not being included. But overall, I still think it probably still a better price than what we could have given her just because of the distance of the project. But yeah, we're always happy to see, with us or without us, we want our clients to succeed and have a successful project and that they can earn money, especially when it's money that is not just their money, but her parents' money that's, it's their life savings that she's investing in. And that's important to us too.
Yeah. Successful clients come back and they recommend us. So we appreciate our clients. Ask questions, verify their licenses. In the state of Texas, if you're an engineer and you're offering engineering services, you must have an engineering firm and you must have a professional license.
And I mean, obviously, this also exists for surveyors, architects,
Plumbers,
plumbers, electricians. But what I will say is there's a lot of debate sometimes on, hey, this guy's a CAD technician. He can do the drawings just as well as an engineer. And that may be true. It may be that they can even do it better than the engineer. That's not really, it's like saying a mechanic can change an oil better than the guy who designed the engine. It may be very well true because the mechanic is doing this daily. But the mechanic may not know why that oil is important, that it's that exact oil or that it's this or that it's that. There's certain things that they may not know. And when things go wrong, ultimately, if your house burns down because of an electrical fire, someone is held accountable. And if you hired your neighbor or your nephew came in and he's not an electrician, but he's worked on houses before and he wires your whole house and then your house burns down, who's going to be held accountable there? Where you lose your house and your insurance doesn't cover it because you did illegal work. Yeah, you may have saved a couple bucks by using your nephew, but if you would have used a professional electrician, that could have been avoided. And even worse than that, what if someone died? What if you had kids or someone in your home and they died because of this?
In this particular case, in order for the electrician can go in and do the work at your house, electricity wise, he needs to put his license on the permit application and he is responsible for that work. He put his license number so they can find him.
Yep.
The same goes with engineering. If we're the engineers, every time we submit a seal, a complete set of plans, or whenever we require subdivision, we stamp with our engineer's seal. It has our name, it has our engineering ID, and
The firm number.
and we have the phone number that shows that everything is tied to our engineering practice. And if there's an issue, they can come in and find us. That's the requirement by law.
And if you paid someone from Home Depot to come wire your house for a couple of bucks a day, $100 a day or whatever to come wire your house, good luck finding that guy again if your house burns down. And even if you do find him, he's gonna say, "I never wired your house. Where's the invoice? Where's the check? Where's the proof that person wired your house?"
Yeah.
And it's the same thing over here.
Where's his insurance? How's his insurance going to cover your burn house?
Yeah. Even if you have a text message, ultimately, there's no real way to hold that person accountable for that. And it's very important that you verify professional licenses when you're working with somebody, that if you're working with an engineer, they have a firm number themselves and that they actually work for the firm number and for the engineer. Your main point of contact should be the engineer if you're working with an engineer, or the architect at the very least. Those are, if you're doing any type of development, either the architect or the engineer should be your point of contact. Depending on what you're doing, the architect may be a priority. If you're doing a skyscraper, it's probably going to be an architect that's going to be your point of contact. If you're doing a subdivision, it's 99 0.9% of the time, the engineer will be your contact. And never sign broad power of attorney. Always make sure that the authority that you're giving to the person is limited, not just to the scope of work, but to that scope of that specific property for that specific project. You always try to protect yourself. Don't just give them the ability to sign for you documents, because then if you have another property, they may be able to sell that one too.
But then you even go to the bank and
take the loan out.
withdraw all the money out of their account. Keep independent legal counsel. This is helpful. And also, actually, most of our clients have their own legal counsel and their own contracts with them. Used to make sure that.
And we highly recommend you do the same. I mean, for our contracts or for any contract. And if there's any questions or things that are not, the way they need to be, we're always willing to update our contract as long as, it makes sense for our client and for us. We typically don't have an issue as long as it's not, something crazy. If there's just a couple of words that need to change here for limited liability issues, we're 100% always willing to do that. And, we're all people. Sometimes we don't, we may have a mistake or an error in one of our contracts. And if there's a way we can better it, we're always happy to do so. I think it's very critical. So you understand what's being delivered. And so there's no confusion about what you're supposed to receive in exchange for this goods and service. Yeah.
And just like what we were discussing earlier, the previous sample, they had a scope of work that was not complete.
Yeah. Basically, they just told them, hey, we'll charge you this much for the engineering work. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty broad. As for specifics. Yeah, specifics. Like, well, what does this include exactly? Does it include project management or construction? Does it include bid-based services? Does it include, these things that, all these other aspects of, or is it just engineering? Is he just going to give you the plans and you're going to go submit them at the county? Or like, what are we, exactly looking at here? Because that can happen. They can provide you a pair of plans and here you go, here are the plans. And I never said there are going to be approved plans and, good luck. Here's what I prepared for you. So it's important to have a scope and also when they're going to deliver it. Because what happens if you sign this contract and then 6 months down you're like, hey, I haven't heard from I've been ready to start and they're, oh yeah, we haven't gone to start on it. We're planning to do so as soon as we get a chance. As soon as we're able, we'll get started. And then
tomorrow never comes.
Yeah. If we've had people call us with people that they've been waiting on for 2 years and they never move forward with anything.
There was a client out of town. He's been waiting on that project for you. You sign something, keep a copy. You never know when you're gonna need it, especially if your project's running.
Yeah. If you find someone that you trust and you think they're trustworthy, or you may have a cousin who's been doing development or a friend, those may be good options of people. If you feel you can trust them, those may be good options for how to get started. They may be able to show you the ropes, but still verify that what they're doing is correct. Get counsel either from an engineering firm that's trusted in the area or from attorney, your accountant. There's a lot of attorneys that are involved in plan development. You'd be surprised. You may go visit your eye doctor and they're very involved in land development. You may visit your dentist and you can probably talk to them about land development, and a lot of them do land development.
And it happens.
I tell you because it does. Yeah. It's happened to me where I go talk to my dentist and then he's like, oh yeah, I have a couple of projects that I've done, and it's more common than you may be aware. A lot of people, it's not a common topic that comes up, but a lot of people do land development and have experience. But I'd recommend attorney or engineering.
Surround yourself with professionals.
Verify everything, even if it does come from a trusted source.
I think with that, we close out today's podcast, Jacob.
Yeah.
I guess leave us a comment if you guys have any questions or topics you guys want to discuss. Maybe
quick shout out. Yeah, we have a subdivision that we're about to break ground on. We're working on the financials for that right now, but we're probably going to be announcing those soon. We may throw that in here somewhere in either one of the corners of this video so you guys can see what we're working on, and feel free to call if you have any questions on making a reservation for one of those lots.
Blue Hills coming up.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Have a good one.